Okay, welcome to this BioHub video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the cell, alright? So, first, we're going to talk about the cell theory. Cell theory has been changed greatly over the centuries, first starting with the discovery of the cell being in a cork. This person was called Robert Hooke. He discovered the cell. He was actually drinking a ton with his friends and decided, and when he fell over and broke his bottle. And in that bottle, he looked through it and saw these tiny, tiny little cells in a cork. And he came up with the word cell from monasteries and their small, tiny, compact rooms. So this was the first main discovery. As well as Robert Hooke made the first simple microscope to be able to use and observe the cork, as he then first learned about it. So we then move on to Anton von Leeuwenhoek, who was the first person in 1674 to discover the first living cell. This happened to be the algae Spirogyra. This really built off of Robert Hooke's discovery because Robert Hooke discovered the idea of the cell. However, this was the first living cell that was discovered. And another thing that he found out was that he scratched off some of the plaque on his teeth and put it under a microscope to observe that as well. So he found not only the first living plant cell as well as the first prokaryote as well, bacteria. This was a huge leap into the study of organisms as well as cells, because this then led on to, in 1838, Schleiden and Schwann made a huge discovery to cell theory as they found the discovery of plant and animal cells. Schleiden discovered plant cells and Schwann discovered animal cells. And they were the first to come up with the foundation of the modern day cell theory. So, the modern day cell theory comprises of three components. First, cells must come from other existing cells, no spontaneous generation. There was a study that was done where a steak was put out in the open, and then there was another steak that was completely sealed off, and they were both sterilized, no bacteria, no nothing in them. They were just themselves. The steak that was out in the open had maggots, it had bacteria, and it had all these other organisms on it. Meanwhile, the steak that was completely covered didn't have anything on it. The meat just started to deteriorate a little bit. So the second one is that cells are the smallest unit of life. Now atoms are smaller, however, those are the chemical components, not the smallest unit of life. Where cells are their own living organism themselves that make up bigger stuff like we are. The third one, all living organisms are comprised of one or more cells. Prokaryotes are one cell. Algae, some of them are one cell as well. But us, we're multicelled. We're made up of billions of cells, actually. So these three components make up the modern cell theory today. Now, prokaryotic cells, bacteria, is a cell that contains DNA material in a nucleoid central region in a cytoplasm. It has pili, which are these hair-like creatures on the outside of its capsule. A capsule is what it's called, that shape, the figure, and a flagella. Flagella is like a um, tail-like appendage on the back of it, which will help it move around. It also contains 70S ribosomes, which are the site of protein synthesis, creates proteins for the cell, which is really needed for the structure and the recreating of other components of the cell. Also contains a cell membrane and a cell wall. Cell membrane, go into more detail later on, however, it's just like a think of it as like a dome that's around the cell that helps protect it from outside stuff while also trying to bring in some good stuff as well into the cell. And the cell wall, which is a box-like shape around the cell, which gives it structure and protects it as well. So as like I said before, it contains a capsule shape, which is kind of elliptical. It's like an oval, and they're very, very small. And fun fact, prokaryotes do not have any organelles. No organelles. Now, to eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells do contain cell-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells have a round shape and can have or not have a cell wall, but it does always have a plasma membrane. That is one thing in common. The prokaryote and the eukaryotic cell both have a plasma membrane. Eukaryotic cells are much larger than prokaryotes and have, instead of 70S ribosomes, 80S ribosomes. And the eukaryotic cells as well contain nucleus-bound DNA, meaning that their DNA is enveloped in something called the nucleus. So now as we're going to plant and animal cells. There's plants and animal cells. One main difference is that one of them contains chloroplasts and the other one does not contain chloroplasts. Even though they're both eukaryotic, that is one difference between them. Another difference is that plant cells contain a cell wall, while animal cells do not have a cell wall. One difference though between prokaryotes and plant cells is they both have a cell wall too. So, chloroplasts, we'll get into more depth later. However, they do photosynthesis to make the plant glucose and allow it for it to make food. These are unique characteristics of the plant. Animal cells, however, contain lysosomes. Lysosomes are like a waste. They're like a garbage truck, basically. Garbage truck, they're like antibacteria. They get rid of the waste in the cell. They break it down waste and move it out of the cell. So, there's another thing is that the mitochondria, as we all know, is the powers of the cell. However, this organelle has a running theory that was mentioned, and it's called the endosymbiotic theory. Now, this theory states that billions of years ago, when life first came to be, the prokaryotic cells were the only things around. However, they were heterotrophic, meaning that they would eat one another. However, one prokaryotic cell was so big that when it ate another prokaryotic cell, then they came in a symbiotic relationship, meaning that they live and coexist together. And it was a mutualistic one, where the prokaryote would then eat something, and the prokaryote inside would then digest it and share that energy to the bigger one, while the bigger one gave it protection from the other prokaryotes. And this is how the mitochondria came to be, because, fun enough, the mitochondria contains DNA that is only passed down from your mother. So, not your father, your mother. So next we're going to know the mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. But there's more. So an organelle that animal and plant cells have that perform the reaction cellular respiration. This is an aerobic, or with air, process that creates something called ATP. This creates energy when the bond of the third phosphate is destroyed or broken. So it's got 3 phosphates, 1, 2, 3, and when you break that third bond between the second and third one, that makes a lot of energy, and that's how animals get their energy. Plants do this as well, but it's not their main source, because now we're going to get into chloroplast. This is the main way that plants get their energy. It's found only in plant cells, is the powerhouse of the plant as it does photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a great thing to have, because even though we're heterotrophs as animals, we need to eat other things, including plants. And plants contain glucose, which we need to do cellular respiration. It's one of the reactants. So it takes CO2, water, and sunlight to make glucose. Glucose is the energy of the plant, and it's really important, as animals need that in order to make energy for themselves. Chlorophyll is a pigment in chloroplasts that give the plants their green color. That's why they're green. Nucleus. Nucleus is a region in the cell that houses the DNA. This region is mostly seen as a big circle in the cell. It's going to be this big circle, and it's going to have this like darker circle in it. That's the nucleolus. The nucleolus holds the DNA, actually, though. But the DNA is the region outside. This is the site at which DNA is taken to make proteins and other necessary components when replicating. We'll get into DNA synthesis later. Prokaryotic cells do not have this. They just have a nucleoid region where the DNA is kept, and it's not it's called the nucleic envelope, and in prokaryotic cells they do not contain that. Next we're going to ribosomes. Ribosomes are important, both prokaryotes and eukaryotes, because they're site which protein synthesis occurs. Making those proteins are used in a lot of different things. This is a process. Proteins are made, and it's very important for the cell to maintain homeostasis. And these are just free floating in the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm. It's a jelly-like substance that houses the organelles, contents of a cell. It's the largest organelle of the cell, and it is very important. It's also the other organelles do not drift away off in the cell, and is also permeable meaning it can allow things to pass through and stop them if need be. Also, many processes take place in this cell as well. So now we have the endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER. I'm gonna abbreviate it to ER because it's a handful to say. There are two ERs, one being rough, one being smooth. The rough ER holds a lot of ribosomes on it, and is this rigid structure in the middle of the cell, and it allows for materials to pass through the cell. The smooth ER is a similar function, but it doesn't house those ribosomes. It just does the moving around of the function of the materials. All right, next we're going to the Golgi apparatus. Speaking of moving materials around, this is the main thing. The Golgi apparatus is like the Amazon warehouse of the cell. So it's going to take these vacuoles, which are these bubble-like substances, and it's going to put materials in the vesicle, and it's going to bring that vesicle to other parts of the cell where it needs to be. So this is a very, very big organelle. Next, we're going to lysosomes. Spoke about it before. They're the trash cans of the cell. They contain enzymes to break down the waste of the cell and to take care of that waste and bring it outside of the cell. It is important, as if the cell had a bunch of waste in it, it would just die. It's not good. We want the waste to be out of there so the cell can be healthy. Next, we're going to the cell membrane. This is complex. We will go further in depth later. It's another chapter, actually. Talk about another name, phospholipid bilayer. But right now we're going to call this the cell membrane. Simply, the cell membrane is a layer outside the cell, so think of it as the nucleic envelope. So it's a circle around the cell that will bring good things in, it'll keep bad things out, it will keep good things inside the cell, it'll get bad things outside the cell, from inside the cell, outside the cell. So it's that like bouncer to the club, like keeping the bad people out, keeping the good people in, all that stuff. And it's called semi-permeable because as the cytoplasm is permeable where things can move around, it's semi-permeable. So some things can come in, some things won't be able to get in. And it mostly takes in minerals, nutrients, and other stuff as well. But likes to keep out those viruses and harmful bacteria. Next, we're going to go to the cell wall. Gives structure to the plant. Gives protection to the plant. Very simple. It's going to be this like box-like structure. Only in plants and prokaryotes, not animal cells. We're going to the flagellum. Pili, I spoke on this before. They're very important for movement of prokaryotes. It's these hair-like and tail appendages about the... So we have the capsule here. It's going to be these like tiny little hairs, and then there's going to be one long tail. The flagella is the long tail, the pili are the small hairs. Next, we're going to do the vacuole. So the vacuole is found in plants and animals. In animals, though, they're very, very small because they have a very limited function. Because the plants need that vacuole because it holds water mainly and other minerals as well. And plants need that water in the vacuoles to do photosynthesis. So it wants to keep that water inside the cell for later use for photosynthesis. Meanwhile, in animals, they don't have chloroplasts, so they're not able to do photosynthesis. So that they have these small, tiny vacuoles where they keep like a limited amount of water in it and other stuff as well. And that has to do with this chapter. Thank you. And can't wait to see you in the next chapter.